you say? Oh, he showed me Baphomet, and he said he'll bring them down one by one. And then the Lord said, Taurus, and then he said it was a seal, it was a mark of faith onto their God. Okay, he said the waters are high and the tide is rolling in. I will bring them down one by one. X marks the spot. What do I mean? Buried in faith, Antigone, conundrum. Is that a word? Conundrum? Desperation. They are lying. I must say it. They are lying. I see Beyonce screaming. She's angry and enraged. She's invoking spells. I hear Hydra Collider, and I hear Baphomet. Okay, he went boom. He showed me. Oh my goodness, I completely forgot about it. That thing with CERN, the play, and Baphomet came through the portal of CERN. Yes, indeed, two worlds are becoming one. Franchises. What does that mean? Sequels. I see the word corona. Okay, he's reminded me about Beyonce being on the white horse with the white hair trying to mock Jesus on her album cover, and what the meaning of the rider on the white horse with the crown being corona. A wise one, I tell you the truth, Sediaya Messiah, you will see it in a greater light. Who is the king? See, Messiah, my kingdom come, I reign above them all. I hear in too deep, they're in too deep, and I see Beyonce on this horse, and the horse is in the mud, like stuck in the mud, in too deep. They will fall on their faces now, one by one. When two worlds become one, Hydra Collider, I think I'm saying that right, telescope, free range glory, hindsight, new view, proportionate wealth. New sources are coming, sources of energy, reliable source. I see gold, future endeavor, silver will make a way when you thought there was none. New energy, production, increase, gold mine, copper, transformity will take place, all for my glory. What does that mean? The year is not over yet. What does that mean? Due diligence. Is there another calendar? So the Lord wanted me to read Psalms 81. And earlier yesterday, the Lord kept bringing up to me like a new moon. And I'm like, okay. So I put that in the back of my mind. I was like, okay, whatever. I wonder why he keeps saying that. And then he put it in my spirit that a new moon means a new beginning. And I was like, okay, yeah, I'll look that up later. And then I sat down in prayer. I said, Lord, what do you want me to read? And he's like, Psalms 81. And this is what Psalms 81 says. Sing aloud to God our strength. Shout for joy to the God of Jacob. Raise a song. Sound the timbrel, the sweet-sounding lyre with the harp. Blow the trumpet at the new moon, at the full moon on our feast day. For this is the statute for Israel, an ordinance of the God of Jacob. He established it for a testimony in Joseph,
when he went throughout the land of Egypt, I heard the language of one whom I did not know, saying, I removed the burden from his shoulder. His hands were freed from the basket. You called in the time of trouble, and I rescued you. I answered you in the secret place of thunder. I tested you at the waters of Merib Selah. Hear, O my people, and I will admonish you. O Israel, if you would listen to me, let there be no strange God among you, nor shall you worship any foreign God. I am the Lord your God, who brought you up from the land of Egypt. Open your mouth wide, and I fill it. Open your mouth wide, and I fill it. But my people would not listen to my voice. And Israel did not consent to obey me, so I gave them up to their stubbornness of their heart, to walk in the path of their counsel, of their own counsel. Oh, that my people would listen to me, that Israel would walk in my ways. Then I would quickly subdue and humble their enemies, and turn my hand against their adversaries. Those who hate the Lord would pretend obedience to him and cringe before him, and their time of punishment would be forever. But I would feed Israel with the finest of the wheat, and with honey from the rock I would satisfy you. So remember, I told you guys that the Lord kept telling me new moon, right? And it's the beginning or something. And I was like, okay, let me really look this up and see if I'm hearing right. Like, what does a new moon mean, right? So I said, okay, let me go to Google and see what a new moon means. And look what it says for a new moon. And sure enough, this is what it says. The new moon is commonly known as a time to initiate beginnings. And it says it's not only begins a new cycle, but also ends the phase that came before, guys. So I'm like, okay, so Lord, when is the new moon? I cannot make this up. Look, guys, look and see when the next new moon is. The next new moon is April 8th. So I know the Lord is saying that this eclipse is a marker of time that is bringing in the new, right? So the old is left behind, and now the new is coming, and the new is going to bring destruction and chaos for the enemies of God, but abundance of wealth for God's people, right? And look over here in verse 6. I removed the burden from his shoulder. His hands were freed from the basket. You called in the time of trouble, and I rescued you. I answered you in the secret place of thunder. I tested you at the waters of Merib Selah. So I believe that's why the Lord wanted me to read Psalms 81, because he's telling us April 8th is the marker. April 8th is the point of no return.
What does that mean? The year is not over yet. What does that mean?
It was in the new moon month called ABIB that the first Passover on earth was held when Israel left Egypt, and that which begins the year. What is ABIB? This is the term and the Hebrew root word used in that verse, ABIB. It is a condition most exclusively related to the barley crop, which will be the first in the year to grow in the region of Israel. The King James Version translates ABIB to mean in the ear or green ears of corn. This is wrong. The crop being ABIB does not necessarily mean color. However, if barley is in this stage, it is useless for the harvest. It still contains too much moisture and cannot be ground into flour. When barley is ABIB, it is in a specific state of maturity that will enable a harvest in the upcoming 14 to 21 days, hence 2 to 3 weeks, at which point it will have dried enough with the grains, then being hard and making a pounding into crushed flour possible. Thus, the first month has been named by the Creator after a development level of the barley crop. There can be no mistake. Equinoxes are never once mentioned. Remember, if we get the first holy feast date wrong, all upcoming feasts in the year will be invalid. We have to diligently mark out the proper day.
These are the appointed feasts of the Lord, which you shall proclaim as times of holy convocation, for presenting to the Lord food offerings, burnt offerings, and grain offerings, sacrifices and drink offerings, each on its proper day.
We soon discover that this marking is all centralized on the barley crop. As said before, we will have a new moon to start the month. There will be a timeline in this month. ABIB barley is now needed to determine further progress on the holy timescale. On the 14th of the ABIB month is the day the Passover lamb has to be sacrificed. The immediate following 7 days are the days of unleavened bread. It is a commandment that this feast must also take place in the ABIB month, which it will if we are by default following the ABIB method.
You shall keep the feast of unleavened bread. 7 days you shall eat unleavened bread, as I commanded you, at the time appointed in the month ABIB, for in the month ABIB you came out from Egypt.
From its ABIB state, the barley will naturally need a further 2 weeks to be harvest ready. This has already been implemented in Elohim's calculations. The first fruits of the crop has to be presented to the priest in the week of unleavened bread, after the weekly Sabbath. This is also a commandment.
You shall bring the sheaf of the first fruits of your harvest to the priest, and he shall wave the sheaf before the Lord so that you may be accepted. On the day after the Sabbath the priest shall wave it.
In the 7 days of matzah or unleavened bread, there will always be a weekly Sabbath day. We have the sacrificial week of Yeshua, for example, here. If the Sabbath were on the 19th instead of the 17th, as depicted in this chart, then the first fruit offering will be on the 20th, the first day of the week. Now, the first fruits also mean that the harvest is to start. Israel may not eat of the crop until the Bikurim or the first fruits offering has been presented before the priest. At the first fruits, the harvest begins. The barley has now moved from being ABIB to being harvestable. This is also a requirement.
You shall count 7 weeks. Begin to count the 7 weeks from the time the sickle is first put to the standing grain.
From the Bikurim, we now number the 7th Sabbath to count down to Shavuot, which is Pentecost, the Feast of Weeks.
Then you shall keep the Feast of Weeks to the Lord your God with the tribute of a freewill offering from your hand, which you shall give as the Lord your God blesses you.
Without the barley being in the ABIB state, there is no possible way of determining these set times. We repeat, we need the barley development and not the equinox. Very simple and totally dependent on the divine appointment of Yahweh. New moons are seen all around the globe, and barley too is grown worldwide. Where does the sighting and observation now take place?
And the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, Speak to the people of Israel and say to them, When you come into the land that I give you and reap its harvest, you shall bring the sheaf of the first fruits of your harvest to the priest.
All the conditions must be met in the Holy Land Israel. No other place is acceptable to the Father. Our salvation is tied into Israel. So we will briefly summarize. ABIB shall be the beginning of months. It is when Israel left Egypt. Matzah is to be eaten in the month of ABIB. The first fruits are brought in the month of ABIB. The Passover has to be kept in the month of ABIB. The harvest is to begin in the month of ABIB. All is dependent on the ABIB stage of the barley. But wasn't the barley already ABIB at the 7th plague in Egypt? Yet Israel left at the 10th plague. Was this not too late? Remember in Leviticus 23, the 10th verse, we know that the right conditions are met in Israel to begin the month and feast. It was the Almighty, the Creator himself, who knew of these conditions and instituted these first feasts for Israel. When the barley is ABIB and the new moon is sighted in Israel, then may we begin with the celebration of the Father's holy feasts.